giving me this opportunity to be here. We are living in very, very uncertain times right now. We are living in very vulnerable times. We don't know what the future is going to be. So my purpose of doing this presentation really is to unveil the stories that have not been told during this saga. And hence I have subtitled this, Giving Voice to Grief and Loss During COVID-19. Now you see, COVID-19 has not only destroyed lives literally, it's also affected our jobs and economies. It's prompting governments all over the world to pull out stops to contain this unseen enemy. But I want to ask you, all of you here today on Safe Space, what about the other unseen enemy that has been sitting under our noses all this time? How is our nation's mental health affected by death, physical and psychological illnesses, family strife in your homes right now, job losses, yes, economic struggles, they make up the humdrum of our daily lives. And all this is happening even pre-COVID-19. Look at this. This is Singapore in pre-COVID-19 and some statistics that is public information. 1 in 7 people in Singapore has experienced a mental disorder in their lifetime. But more than 3/4 with this disorder, they are not seeking professional help. We are talking about the elderly here as well, age 60 and above. They are taking their own lives, and this peaked at 129 in 2017. There are a lot of aged who are committing suicide. It's not just the aged people. How about the teenagers? Our teenage boys in particular. 10 to 19 committed suicide in 2018. It's the highest ever. So if you look at things from this perspective of the aged, the young, okay, and people not coming forward to seek help, why is that happening? I think partly it's because of the priorities that our authorities are putting on mental health. And there's only 3% of our healthcare is spent on mental health compared to 11% for diabetes. So this is Singapore pre-COVID-19. Now, if you throw COVID-19 and the circuit breaker rules into the mix today, I think we might have a mental health crisis on the brink of implosion. Yeah. So this is Singapore today, right now in the thick of the crisis. And these are the headlines that are kind of staring back at us from the mainstream media. Companies are retrenching staff, deep recessions, be prepared for the long haul. And amid all these headlines on the economy and the job losses, we also are bombarded with circuit breaker rules, social distancing, stay-at-home notices, national lockdowns, fines for the breaking rules, and the list goes on and it goes on. Yes, we know we need to flatten the curve. We need to save our jobs and our economy. But let me ask you, and let me ask myself as well, what about the emotional impact of these rules? In my capacity as a private counselor, I have been given the privilege of entering the lives of people who tell me their stories. What about the story of the mother, the grieving mother who can't even bid a proper final goodbye to her own son at the funeral? What about the child that I know who can't celebrate his first birthday because his own father is stuck across the border? And I just recently read about a young man who lost his mother to the COVID-19 crisis during the fasting month. And you can't have his friends and relatives share his grief. And there are many, many, many of us who are trapped in our homes, enduring difficult and tense relationships with our family members. They can't get out. How safe are they? How safe are we? There are many, many stories that we have not heard. So these are questions we need to ask ourselves today, right here, right now. And let me ask you this as well. How are we doing, really? How are you doing? As authorities save our lives and jobs, who is caring for our mental health? If you are suffering from anxiety or depression, or even grief, are you being seen and heard? Or if you know friends who are suffering, are they being seen and heard? So, as much as technology, texting, and video conferencing, I mean, they are great. But we humans are wired for connection, real connection. So what the COVID-19 has done to us today is it robbed us of all this connection more than ever. And we need this connection now. So here, we are looking at the daily rise in infections and then going into the hundreds. Surely we must wonder, when is this ever going to end? So once again, I ask ourselves, how are we doing, really? So I have a few objectives I want to do today. I want to be able to make sense of what we are feeling inside, but somehow we can't put a finger to it. I want to generate some self-awareness of whatever emotions, and I want to put a name to these emotions. To tame it, we got to name it. So let's find out what these emotions are. Secondly, I want you to recognize the structural forces at play. It's not all about you. It's not all on you. Don't make it all about you. There are external messages that we are feeding upon every day. And these are also affecting the way we operate and the way we think. So it's not all you. Of the different emotions that we might be experiencing, I do want to focus on one emotion, that is grief. We've heard a lot about anger. We've heard about stories of social ambassadors being abusive. We've heard of people being abusive to social ambassadors. Anger. We also heard of a woman, a Singapore Indian woman, who refused to wear a mask and say she's a sovereign. Okay. We've seen anger as well. There's a lot of resentment. But I think there's a lot more to COVID-19 than anger and resentment. And I want to focus on these other emotions, particularly grief. And lastly, when we have all this information before us, and this sense of self-awareness and the structural forces at play, and when we understand what grief is doing to us, what is the road ahead? Okay? What do we do? So I'm going to start by have you look at this case study. This is Thomas. This is a real life example. And of course, the names have been changed to protect his privacy. So I'm going to give you 10 seconds or 15 seconds to read through this, okay? Are we okay? All right. So now we read the case study. I want to ask you this. Should Thomas be angry and resentful? Should he be? Yeah. He's a freelance wedding photographer. He's taking the risk to be on his own so he can spend more time with his parents, his elderly parents. Yeah, sure, he lives in a home, the landed property. But he's caring for his parents. He's taking lots of risks to be on his own. Yes, he might have 6 months of savings, but they might run out too. So should he be feeling angry? He was denied the funds from the government. He might be denied more funds because he's underage and because of the property that he's living in. Should he be angry? I want you to put your answers in the chat group and tell me, should he be angry or not? Okay? Yes, of course he should be angry. Let me tell you why. What is anger? Now, the definition of anger is perceived injustice. It's the unfairness of life, despite playing by the rules, to work hard, to care for your parents, and to take risks as well, which is what Thomas is doing. Now, Thomas is angry because his worldview has been upset. Okay, the worldviews are our survival tools, which make us feel safe and belong. Now, the authorities' rejection of Thomas has actually upset his worldview. Okay, he has questioned his belief system and his place in the world. So he is a freelance photographer, yeah, and he's taken risks so that he can have the flexibility, and that flexibility allows to care for his parents. That's how his world works. Now, because of the COVID-19 crisis, that whole system has collapsed. His worldview has crashed. Of course, he's angry. So the question I ask you is, what is your worldview? What is your belief system? Okay. What is your place in the world that has been upset by this virus? What else is he feeling? Anyone? Is it only anger? Please enter your answer in the chat group. What else besides anger could he be displaying? Anxiety, okay. Anger, what else? Frustration, fear, I see that. Fear, more fear, thank you. Hopelessness. Okay, thank you. I'm going to tell you something else. I think you guys have are there. They're all different forms of anger and anxiety, but he's also disappointed. And where do you see the disappointment, you might ask? Why is he disappointed? Right? He's got a house, he's got enough savings. Disappointment is unmet expectations. Now, he gave up his full-time job so he could spend more time with his friends as well. Yeah, these are the same friends who support him emotionally and financially. And now, what did the friends tell him? Oh, come on, Thomas. You don't need to be worried. Come on, you got 6 months of savings. You live in a landed property. Your elderly parents will care for you. There are many people worse off than you. They have mouths to feed, they have mortgages to pay, they can't even afford their insurances anymore. What are you complaining about, Thomas? What does that do to Thomas? Okay, it makes him feel invisible. It makes him feel that he's not being heard, he's not being listened. So anger is actually never too far away from disappointment. Yeah. So you have anger towards the authorities, there's a bit of a distance there, but the disappointment kind of tends to linger, and it lingers in relationships you nurture and develop. What about? So can you see the disappointment? His feelings are not being validated by his own friends, the same friends that supported him when he set up his wedding photography business. Can you see the disappointment? What else? What other emotion is he experiencing? Yeah. What about loneliness? Okay. Do you think that Thomas is lonely? Do you think he's isolated? Well, maybe not. He lives with his parents, right? He lives in a nice house. He's got all the support he's needed. The answer is Thomas is lonely. See, when your feelings, right, guys, are not validated, especially by those you trust, the friends you trust, and they don't see your feelings, they don't validate your feelings, psychological isolation can set in. Yes, I know Thomas is arguably better than most people, but this does not mean his feelings, his anger, and his disappointment do not need to be validated. Now, validation is not solutioning. I'm not asking you to solve my problems. That's not validation. It is about being seen and heard by the friends and by the people you trust and you love. So these feelings can actually be worsened. These feelings of isolation can worsen when those you trust continue to kind of render you invisible. Okay? I want to focus on one emotion, very, very important emotion that no one has kind of picked up on. Can you guess what the emotion is? It's actually in my subtitle of my presentation. Okay. All right. So Thomas is actually experiencing grief. Grief. Okay. So these are the 4 emotions he's experiencing. He's also grief in what he's doing. You see, Thomas is not just grieving the loss of his business, okay, but the meaning he attaches to it, the importance of friendships, filial piety, and trust in authority are gone through this job, through what he has lost through this job. These are the meanings that we need to, that underlie his job and not being seen, and not being heard. So these meanings are intrinsically kind of linked to your worldview for survival and your belonging. So in his isolation, when no one is kind of validating his feelings, the question we need to ask is he able to process this grief for him to move forward? Can he make new meaning of his grief? Is it even possible when it's not validated and witnessed by others? So this is the grief that Thomas is experiencing as well, the losing of his job, the meaning that the job gives him, and how that meaning is attached to his worldview, his belief system. And in all this loss, no one is looking at him, no one's hearing him. Okay? I wonder if you know a Thomas. I wonder if you know someone who is going through a loss, not necessarily a job, but a loss of maybe a way of living, a way of meeting friends, a way of connection that's no more in existence because of the circuit breaker. Are we witnessing his grief? Are we validating his loss? Are we okay, guys? Are we all right? Are we on track? Are you following me? If you are, just say yes on the chat. Okay, let's go on. I want to focus on grief, yeah? So next question is, which is grief to you? Which picture best describes grief? Please enter your answer in the chat group, please. Is it A or B? A or B? Ah, we have lots of A's. We have one B, both. Feline Lim, both. Joyce Tan could be B too. Okay, Yasmin A. I think the only person who got it right was Feline. Feline, you got it right. It's both A and B. Okay? It's both A and B. Why do people say it's A? Well, grief is usually associated with bereavement, losing a loved one. And then you talk about depression and being withdrawn and not wanting to talk about anyone, right? So it's a bit of a subdued, withdrawn kind of emotion that you don't want to be with anyone. You just want to be in your room. Grief is a lot more than that. And you know why? It's because it's beyond bereavement. It's not just about losing people. It's actually a multifaceted response, okay? You can lose your job, that's also grief. You can lose your ability to cook. You can lose your ability to do gardening because age has caught up with you. There's also a loss, and there's also grief, okay? You have a loss now, right now you have lost the ability to get out there and be with your friends. And you need to be with your friends face to face because you're going through a crisis at home and you have no one to talk to. But you can't. What does that do to you? What does the isolation do to you when you can't go out and do that? What are you grieving? You're grieving that loss of connection. Yeah. So losses and grief don't just refer to the death of a loved one. It refers to things that are meaningful to us and losing them. Now, grief has also a multifaceted response. What do I mean? Now, just now, most of you chose A, and I'm guessing that when you chose A, you associate grief with crying, tears, being quiet, being alone. But actually, grief is a lot more than that. Grief is all that, but it's also aggression, destructive behavior. You could get lying, attention seeking, okay, rage and anger. Okay. What do I mean by this? How can it be? I want to bring you back to the Singapore lady, the Indian lady who did not wear a mask, and she said she was a sovereign. I don't know her, okay, but I'm wondering whether she's grieving. Whatever she's grieving in her own life, is she taking it out in public and being aggressive, okay, and fighting with the social distance ambassadors? That is also attention seeking. That's aggression. That's destructive behavior. So could that also be grief that this lady is facing? So we have to expand our minds on what grief is. Grief is also destructive behaviors, rage and anger, a high need for attention. This is also grief. And in particular, I want to talk about anticipatory grief. And this is very relevant to our times today. Now, anticipatory grief is really grief before loss. Oh my gosh, look at the COVID infections today. They're going up by the hundreds. Oh my gosh, the circuit breaker is going to end on June 2nd. I don't think it's going to end. I think it's going to be extended another month. Oh my gosh, there are more people there are 20 deaths now in Singapore. Oh gosh, if this continues, then going to be 30 deaths. I'm not going to have the cash flow to keep my restaurant afloat. My children are not going to go back to school. I can't connect with people anymore. It's over. I know it's going to be over. Okay, can you see this? Can you see what I'm doing? I'm anticipating the demise of my own well-being even before the event has happened. There's fear and anxiety, and that's also interwoven into grief. And can you see how grief is actually a complex emotion? It encompasses fear and anxiety, depression, even aggression. But in particular, I want to talk about how this grief is not being acknowledged. It's quite disenfranchised grief. If you go back to the story of Thomas, Was his grief ever acknowledged? His friends dismissed him. The authorities dismissed him. Oh no, you don't fulfill the criteria for grants. Okay? Why is he not being acknowledged? Why his own friends are not even acknowledging his grief? He's not being seen, he's not being heard. So this is a grief cycle, yeah, and it shows you 5 stages from denial to acceptance. Do remember that this is actually not linear, it can go back and forth. But the reason why I'm bringing up this graphic image is to show you that grief is a complex emotion. If you look under depression, you can see hostility, okay? It's not just tears and being withdrawn. There's also anger, right? And there's also shock. So we are looking at grief in 5 stages. Yeah, it is not just, once again, a bereavement, a withdrawn stage of life where you don't want to talk to anyone. It is complex, and it needs to be dealt. It needs to be addressed in the cycle, non-linear but in the cycle. And I guess this chart kind of helps us to understand what grief is, yeah, and the complexities and the implications of grief. If you have friends who are going through loss and all you see is anger, and all you see is depression, don't just look at it in isolation. It could be part of the grieving cycle. Are we okay? Okay, all right, I'll continue. So I want to really break down grief to you. Grief is definitely not just about saying goodbye to your dear ones, your family members and your friends. It's not just the job losses. It's the way that we find value in the things that we do, the things that are important to us. It could even be as simple as caring for my family through the meals that I cook. It could be gardening, because being out in the garden and being in sunshine, that helps me be part of nature, and it gives me a sense of living. So if I lose that capability to do gardening just because I'm sick, all right, or I can't go out there and cook anymore because I'm suffering, because I can't get out because of the circuit breaker, that is also a sense of grief, and we need to pay more attention to these things. It might not mean a lot to you because you don't do gardening. It might not mean a lot to you because you prefer to eat out and you don't cook. But if gardening and cooking is part of your value system and it's important to you, okay, and you can't do it anymore, you lose that sense of value. It's stripped away from you. And when that's taken that away from you, when the cooking and the gardening, things that are important to you, are taken and stripped away from you, what does that do to you? It makes you question yourself, and you wake up in the morning, you look in the mirror and say, who am I? I can't even do things I enjoy anymore. What am I here for? Am I useless? So do you have friends or loved ones who might be experiencing this? Have them witness their grief, acknowledge it, and I'll tell you how in a little bit. So I also want to talk about the resilience package. Yeah? Now, the resilience package is a package that has been offered by the government to help us through this difficult time. Now, the resilience package and all the headlines that you saw earlier are revolved around the idea of economic losses, jobs, GDP. What about grief? What about the emotions that we are feeling as part of this loss? The resilience, the word has been thrown around a lot. Okay? Oh, you got to be resilient, you got to bounce back on your feet, you got to move on, Singapore United. But you know what, guys? If you look at the grief cycle earlier, sometimes we just cannot pick up ourselves up. We just can't just move on. There has to be a time and a place for us to process this grief. And if it means lying on bed and doing nothing for the whole day, just so I can get on to the next day, it's okay. But let's not be too quick to come solution. Let's not be too quick to fix our things, to fix what's wrong. Because resilience has to come with time. Third question, is our grief witnessed and acknowledged? Are we afraid to talk about it to friends? Are we afraid to admit it to ourselves? If not, why? How does it make you feel? When no one understands you, when people dismiss you, okay? when you look at the headlines, all you see are economic losses in jobs and migrant workers. What about the stories that I hear of a mother who has to bury her son, and she couldn't even invite enough people to the funeral because of the social distancing? I had to watch the funeral via Zoom. I mean, this is a friend of mine. You know, during the funeral, even the mom and the dad had to sit apart, okay, as their son's coffin went right into the furnace. They couldn't even hold each other's hands, trembling in fear, in grief. That is what COVID-19 is doing to us. It's taking away our sense of connection. And when that connection is being stripped away, we've lost our sense of who we are. We grieve the loss of connection. Okay. So what do we do now? What do we do with all this information? How do we see and hear people for what they are feeling right now and what they are right now? How do we make them seen and heard? How do we make ourselves seen and heard? I think the answer is in vulnerability, not in vulnerability as a form of weakness, but as Brené Brown says, and I'll read out the quote to you right here, it is the emotional exposure to the uncertain. I think it's also the need to be kind to ourselves. It is the courage to be imperfect, to let go of the hustle of being someone else and living up to expectations. What do I mean by that? I think sometimes we are so uncomfortable with vulnerability or not having the answers to something. For example, when Thomas went up to his friends and said, I'm feeling upset, I've lost this and I lost that, I can't do this anymore, I can't care for my elderly parents. What Thomas is doing is he's being vulnerable to his friends. He doesn't have the answers, Thomas, so he's going to his friends, not for the answers, but to engage them, to feel less alone. So what do his friends do? They're not used to seeing that vulnerability. The walls go up, okay? The walls go up. Okay? When your walls go up and you don't want to confront this vulnerability, you stop all engagement. Okay? There's no space for you to engage in because you're uncomfortable. Oh, Thomas, come on, you got 6 months of savings. What are you talking about? There are people who are far worse off than you. Can you see that? Okay, I'm not being vulnerable as a friend. So to be vulnerable means to be kind, to say, I don't have the answers to what you're going through, and that's okay. We're all in this together. I don't know what you're going through, but let me be there for you. Let me be present for you. Are we okay, guys? I'm just going to the chat to see if there are any questions. Any questions at this time? Let me see the chat. Okay, all good, all right, I'll continue. So this is what vulnerability is. So why are we so afraid not to have the answers? With COVID-19 infections are rising, everyone seems to have a theory to the source or the genesis of the virus. Everyone seems to have an answer to when it will end. Everyone seems to have the answer to what they will do to not get infected or infected. But the truth is we don't have the answers. And is that okay not to have the answers? I think it is. I think it's okay not to have the answers and to say we don't know, but we're doing the best we can. We're doing the best we can. And because by saying that we're doing the best we can and we don't have the answers, it opens up the space for people to have a dialogue, an honest dialogue, without any facades of insecurity. Let's drop the armor. Let's drop the walls. Let's drop the armor. And can we replace that with empathy? Yeah. What does it mean to be truly seen and heard? Can we use vulnerability so that we can be seen and heard, so our friends can be seen and heard? Now, in closing, I want to read a paragraph before I take any questions and answers from David Kessler. Now, David Kessler is a grief expert from America. He has written many books on grief, not just grief, grieving your loved ones, but also grieving the mentally ill. And here he writes this: when a loved one suffers from mental illness or addiction, your grief often happens long before death. You grieve for the loss of your future you had imagined, living with that person, for the terrible changes that have overtaken the person, and for the nightmare you watch unfolding, which keeps getting worse and worse. Now, I want to ask you, if I may, you might not be losing someone or living someone with a mental health condition, or you could be not be grieving the loss of a loved one. But whatever loss you're facing, and with how there's so much uncertainty in this virus, you feel like you're watching a nightmare unfold before your eyes every single day. And it keeps getting worse and worse. Do you? But I think that for us to move forward, perhaps in this loss, can we find meaning in this loss? You know, it won't take away the pain, right? It won't restore things the way they were before, but it gives us hope, and perhaps there's hope in the meaning that we can learn and grow from this loss. But I gotta say that to find this meaning and to have hope, we cannot grieve alone. It must be witnessed. It must be seen. It must be heard. Now, David Castle writes that each person's grief is as unique as their fingerprint. And what they all share in common is the need for this grief to be witnessed. It's the need to be fully present to the magnitude of their loss without trying to point out the silver lining. So, guys, in closing, I want to ask myself, including myself, this question, and you. Can we all start by being vulnerable? Not weak in a vulnerable kind of way, not weak, but to be brave. And I think Yasmin asked, how do we be vulnerable? I think first of all, we can say it is just to be comfortable that we don't have all the answers, and that's okay. It is the desire to be imperfect, and to say, I'm not perfect, I don't have the answers, I don't have the solutions, but let's talk about it. I'm with you. Let's get through this together, not get over it. Let's get through this together as a starting point, so that we all can be truly be seen and heard. Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much, James. That was a really useful session. I think I'm speaking on behalf of everyone here that I actually took away a lot of good things from it. So I'm going to take over the screen now to then start the Q&A. So the Q&A is, yeah, so this is the Q&A. So pretty much, I'm going to share this again when it comes to Slido. So if you have any questions to ask, please use your camera to scan this QR code and go to Safe Space, and you can start asking your questions there. So I'm going to give you guys a couple of seconds to do this. And then we can start to look at all the questions that's coming through on Slido. So give me a second while I bring this up. Wow, so quite a few questions came through. So let me go into presentation mode. All right, so James, we have 4 questions for you that's come through. And I'm guessing along the way, more questions will come through as well. So for example, if vulnerability is the antidote to grief, how if someone opens up their vulnerability but isn't met with the support they need?
Yeah, okay. Well, one of the things is I must say is that if this person agrees to open up a vulnerability, I got to say that she's being very, very brave. Yeah. So that bravery, it helps to say to that person, hey guy, hey friend, I want to share something with you, but I really want you to listen. I want you to be very specific in how I can get help, how you can help me by me opening up to you. So the answer is being very specific in what you want your friend to say or not say. It could go something like that. Hey Antoinette, I'm feeling really, really down today. I never actually told anyone this, but Antoinette, I trust you, and I'm coming to you now, and I just want you to listen to me, and I'm not looking for any solutions. I'm just looking for a listening ear, and I want to feel less alone. And I trust you, to give me that listening ear, because in my eyes, you bring comfort to me. So Antoinette, what I'm doing is that, can you see how I'm being very specific in how I'm asking for help?
Yes.
Okay. And you know, people, guys, a lot of us are so used to fixing people's problems, right? You want to say, oh, come on, why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? And these sort of fixing people's problems is really our own discomfort of facing vulnerability. Yeah. But most of the time, we don't want a solution. We just want someone to make us feel less alone. So we have to be specific in how we want to be helped.
Okay, that's great. So the next question here would be, everyone is going through a hard time. How do we know how much we can share so that we don't overburden them with our
Oh my
problems?
God, excellent question, excellent question. Okay, you know why I say it's excellent? Because I committed the same mistake myself. So I was going through an overwhelmed, a very dark period in my life, and I just had to talk to someone, and I kind of chose, I think I chose the wrong person to tell it to, and I was met with a very, very insensitive response. So the first thing we can do is we have to kind of identify who we trust and we don't trust with our information, yeah? That's first. And then I think once we find the person we trust, it shouldn't be a burden to them anymore. If you find someone that you don't really know, then I think that person would probably not respond accordingly, and you will not get the sort of support that you need. So the answer is find someone you trust.
All right. How do we accept when someone we love cannot deal with our vulnerability?
How do we accept when someone we love cannot deal with vulnerability? This is quite hurtful, isn't it? Yeah? And it's hurtful because we expect that person to listen to our problems. I think there's a time and a place for everything. I think that if we love someone, for example, if you're referring to, say, your parent or a sibling that you love, or a spouse that you love, you could choose a good time to do this and do it in bits. Yeah, kind of test the waters a bit. Don't spill everything out and expect them to respond accordingly, because it could be too much, even for someone you love. So I would say there's a time for it, and if that person you love is not expecting you to be vulnerable, and you kind of let it all out 100%, the response would be one of surprise and defense by that person you love. So I would say choose the right time and the place, and kind of test the waters a little bit to see how far you can go with it. Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
That's great.
I want to give you one quick example, if I could, to that same
Sure.
question. I had a client who she had some marital issues, and she had trouble talking to the husband because the husband was always so quick to fix her, to take care of her. Yeah. So she wanted to tell him something very important, and you know what she did was that really, really impressed me. She chose the bedtime, right? After she's put the kids to bed, and when she's really relaxed and the dishes have been washed and the clothes have been put to the closet, she would sit down by the side of the bed, and when everyone's relaxed, and she'll say, "Dear, here's how I feel." And it worked because he was very, very relaxed, and it was that time of the day when they were going to bed. So finding the right time, it could be key. Yeah.
Got it. And how can we be more empathetic while perhaps dealing with our own grief?
Wow. When you're so overwhelmed with grief, it's hard to take a step back and find out what's going on with us. This is really a question about self-compassion, isn't it? Giving ourselves a break and being kind to ourselves. I think that's a question on self-compassion. How can we be more empathetic? And are you talking empathetic to ourselves or to others? I think this person could be talking about how we can be empathetic to others. Well, I think the first step is to listen and not to be too quick to say something and fix it. The first step is just to listen and say nothing. I think that's the first step to empathy. Now, having said that, I do realize that some people don't have a lot of empathy, because sometimes it's a thing that you can learn and develop, but some people don't have it. So I would say if you don't have a lot of empathy, start with being curious. Yeah, curiosity is the start of empathy.
Okay. And so I guess this person missed a section about the moving forward part. Would you have some key takeaways to share?
The key takeaway is, I think self-awareness is definitely one thing. If you look at the grief cycle, that was actually quite important for me, because I kind of almost felt that grief was a lot about depression and being withdrawn, but there's a whole gamut of emotions there. So self-awareness, understanding and being cognizant of what you're going through. And sometimes you just have to take a step back, take a step back as if you're looking at yourself, kind of externalize it, coming out of your physical body and looking at you from a distance and saying, what is James feeling right now? He's going through loss and he's being triggered by this certain person, therefore he's feeling anger. So I think the first step, the key takeaway is generate a self-awareness. That's one. Yeah. I think the second thing is, it sounds a bit simple, but I think that it's really okay not to be okay. Yeah, and you're not alone. And that's the third key takeaway. You're really not alone. Yeah.
Got it. Okay, so the next person has asked, my coping mechanism is to just stop thinking about the situation. But that's me, I'm wired this way, I can switch off. How do you help someone who can't? So,
Gosh, this guy, I'm really envious of you. There's a Chinese saying, 不要想这么多, so don't think about this so much, right? So people who are able to stop their thoughts, I'm kind of envious of you, because most people have trouble thinking. They have trouble replacing their thoughts with positive thoughts. And you can easily switch it off and switch it on. So how do you help someone who can't? Well, first of all, I think you have done quite well in acknowledging that you are able to, but others can't. So I think you have some empathy for that, and you're moving in the right direction by having empathy for that person who can't, even when you can. So that's one. How do you help someone who can't? I think is to be able to listen. If your friend wants to talk to you, it's because he's not being seen and heard by other people. So when he comes to you, he wants to be heard, he wants to be listened, he wants to be seen. So I guess the best thing you can do is just listen to him for a start. Yeah.
okay. And okay, so this person is sharing some resources. So if anyone is someone to talk to, you can call the National Care Hotline, which is great. It's free and 24/7. We are also offering counseling services on Safe Space. So if, for example, you need someone and you can't reach the National Care Hotline, you can also utilize the services that we provide as well. But use whatever service that is comfortable for you is our takeaway from that as well. Okay, so are there any more questions?
Or
So
any more questions on the chat?
Great. So if not, I'm going to start the next two polls. So we just want to get some feedback in terms of, did you guys find this presentation helpful? Was this class helpful? And it'll be good for us to know. So if you could use your camera to scan this QR code again, we would love to get your feedback on, on a scale of 1 to 5, did you find it helpful? I'll give you guys a couple of seconds to do this before we move on to the next part. Okay, we'll give everyone a couple of seconds left to just finish off this poll. So looking good so far. Thank you so much, everyone, for your feedback. We're glad to see that, we got a score of 4.6 out of 5, that majority of you found this course helpful. That's great. Thank you so much. And it's a real testament to the work that James has done to put this class together. I'm going to ask you guys one last question, and this is actually really for your benefit. What kind of other mental health talks or workshops would you like to have? If you had a choice, so that for us at Safe Space, we could find the relevant speaker to do it for you as well. So this is completely open-ended. What other mental health talks or workshops would you like us to organize in the future?
Self-compassion.
It's completely anonymous. Feel free to type in whatever comes to mind, because this talk really benefits you. So if there's anything that you guys are after, this is really the time to let us know what you feel and what kind of talks or workshops would you like to have in the future. So I'll give you guys a couple more seconds to do this. It'll be good if you guys could put all of this in Slido, which is what's in front of you right now, for us to go back and then work with the therapist to create some of these workshops for you in the future. So let's see. So we have a self-awareness workshop, self-care, being amazing, learning empathy, and when and how it can be used. So maybe this could be a follow-up kind of class to what we've done for today. Managing isolation and loneliness, self-love. Okay, so thank you so much, everyone. This is really helpful for us to understand what kind of workshops will benefit you in the future. So, you know, Circuit Breaker is going to be here for another month. We hope it will end soon, even on our side. But the effects of Circuit Breaker will continue on well into the rest of the year. So we will do our best to continue these kind of online classes for you. And thank you so much for joining us today. So I'll leave this Slido open. You can still continue to share with us any kind of workshops that you guys want, even until the end of the day. So feel free to ask your friends and family to fill this up. Great. So thank you so much, everyone. That is the end of our class.